Today, we're having you on the show to talk about where COVID-19 related funding has gone so far. And a reminder for our listeners, there's been several pieces of legislation, 4 packages, in fact, so far, that have largely focused on support for individuals, businesses, aspects of the healthcare industry, as well as state and local governments. So, Tori, I know you've done a little bit of legwork on creating a fun chart for our listeners who can't see it, but what I would do is encourage them to check out the video clip that we're actually going to have for this week's show, because we're going to break down that chart, but we're going to do it in such a way that our listeners can actually understand what's going on. So I'm going to have you share your screen with me now, Tori, to talk about where the funds have been allocated so far, and we can take a look at this chart.
Okay, so just to repeat a little bit of what Chase said, to date, lawmakers in Congress have enacted 4 pieces of legislation in response to the COVID pandemic. Last week, the Congressional Budget Office released a table that summarized the 4 measures and categorized them into 4 buckets, which I show here on the screen. You've got aid to individuals and households, aid to businesses, institutions, state and local governments, spending on medical care and research, as well as administrative support to federal agencies who have been tasked with distributing these funds. So to understand where it all went, I created this little pie chart. And what you can see from the chart is that the bulk of the spending, about 59% or $1.4 trillion, was distributed to businesses and institutions. This makes sense because the largest piece of legislation, the $1.7 trillion CARES Act, included a lot of incentives to keep the employer-employee relationship intact. And then, of course, the bulk of the most recent bill replenished a lot of those funds. So between the Paycheck Protection Program, which has been filled and refilled, the employee retention tax credits, a number of other temporary tax credits designed to increase cash on hand, lawmakers have invested a huge sum of money to provide a bridge for businesses that have been unable to operate.
So, Tori, I want to jump in really quick before we get too far down the road on this chart. I see in the bottom left corner, it says grand total, $2.4 trillion. And is that how much has actually gone out the door, or what has been committed through these large pieces of legislation that Congress has already passed? And I guess a follow-on question, will there be more going out the door soon?
Sure. The $2.4 trillion represents the amount that Congress has appropriated. So that's what government has the authority to spend. It does not reflect the checks that have actually been written. Some money has spent out a lot faster than others. Obviously, the checks have already been distributed to individuals. Unemployment insurance has gone out the door. The Paycheck Protection Program has been refilled already once. But there's some categories of spending, like money for contact tracing, et cetera, that has been slower and has not been distributed yet.
That was actually another question that I had. Has this process been a smooth one in terms of actually getting funds to where they've been committed, or perhaps where they're most needed? It seems like the support for individuals went out, at least initially, pretty smoothly, but there's been some bumps in the road with the PPP program. So can you give sort of a general rundown of what this process has been like so far?
Sure. I think anytime the federal government has to stand up a new program, it's going to take some time and there's going to be some bumps in the road. Staff has to be trained, computers have to be programmed, filters have to be established. A lot of the new program funding, for example, the Paycheck Protection Program, that took a little bit of time to stand up. That we made some changes to the unemployment insurance program. So states that are responsible for implementing those changes had to do some reprogramming on their end. But the federal government, specifically the Treasury Department and the IRS, had a lot of experience with sending checks to individuals because we did it just 10 years ago. That obviously that was money that went out the door pretty quickly.